October. The season of shrieks, spooks, and spleens. But this season brings something everyone loves. Horror games. We all love a good spooky game that gets us jumping in our seats and quaking in our boots. But something I hear all the time is that games these days just aren't that scary anymore. How can that be? They're still horror games, but what makes the old games scary and what makes something scary in the first place? Well, as a bona fide certified coward, I'll describe what I think should make games scary and what things don't. All in my opinion, of course. Horror is subjective, and while I may shriek in terror at normal things, like spiders, you might just try and pet it, you weirdo. So something that pops up a lot nowadays and makes everyone groan is when a spooky image appears and makes a loud noise. However, while jump scares are kind of annoying, they can be effective, such as in the early Five Nights at Freddy's series. Sure, it's what caused us into this jump scare hell we're all living in, but the thing is about FNAF is that that's not the only thing creeping you out. The music and ambiance unnerves you, alongside the characters only sometimes standing on screen, and sometimes they're just a little off to the side. You're scared, paranoid, and afraid as you know they're coming, and all you can do is hold them off, but only once they get to you. Jump scares are just the punishment for not keeping the baddies away. When jump scares are bad are when they're the only scares. Ironically, FNAF itself did this wrong in Security Breach. The only real fear that comes from this game is from the characters popping in your view and going The ambiance isn't spooky, it's interesting, sure, but it won't get your heart bumping. And outside of like maybe the destroyed animatronics appearance, there's nothing really that spooky. It's honestly pretty bupkis. One of the best ways to make someone afraid is to limit their power. But note that I said limit, not removed entirely. Games like Amnesia and Outcast slowly become less scary as every single encounter is exactly the same. See a scary thing, run away. Have scary thing leave you be, pause a little bit, repeat. The formula never changes and thus it eventually dulls the fear. On the opposite end of the spectrum, most Resident Evil games have poor fear factor because you just have so many ways to defend yourself. Ammo, in my experience, is everywhere, and as long as you're not being an idiot, you'll never need to resort to running away or, God forbid, using the knife. At most, you'll worry for your HP or see something gross, but I can't say I've been spooked when playing a Resident Evil game. A game I think handles fear very well is Fatal Frame. While yes, you can defend yourself with your camera, you have limited film. And even if you can keep your standard film up to 30, you never feel quite safe. The enemies can just appear out of nowhere, and Miku isn't the most agile ghost hunter, so evading the spookums is insanely hard. Good spooks. Another one is FNAF, once again. Sure, you have doors to stop the robots, but to do so you need to let them get close in the first place. In the sequel, your flashlight is used to deter Foxy from charging down the hall, but how many times do you need to flash him before he's deterred? Is it better to rapidly flash or hold it on him? And for the vent travelers, you need to mask up like it's 2020, but how can you tell they left? Should you take the mask off and peek into the vent? But if they're still there, will they emerge and can you put it back on and repel them just the same? These games that make you question your power or worry it can't be trusted are amazing at getting the spooks. Something very important in the process of making the player turn their white underwear brown is music and ambiance. Yeah, sure, seeing a horrific monster is pretty spooky, but not seeing a horrific monster, but hearing gurgling and scraping makes things all kinds of worse. Having good ambiance makes things spooky as it preys on humanity's biggest weakness, the brain. When faced with an incomplete picture, the brain comes forth and completes it with whatever it can come up with, and sometimes that can be worse than what's actually happening. In FNAF 1, sometimes you can hear Foxy singing. Is that a hint at something helpful, or is it just there to freak you out? When entering a new zone in Resident Evil, sometimes you'll hear zombies chowing down on a poor fool, but how many are there, and is their target really dead? Or will it thank you for saving it by making you its meal? Sometimes hearing things is worse than seeing. When a game can capitalize on your ears, it can be scarier than anything else. So I guess the best way to scare the player, at least according to me, is to A. Make sure the player is strong enough to do something to defend themselves, but make sure they aren't Doom levels of powerful. Make their supplies limited and keep them on edge so they're afraid to turn every corner. B. Use audio to creep them out. Use just a bit of music that's audible enough to be noticeable, but not comforting, and add into that enemy noises when they're not on screen. You fear for what's coming up. And C. If you're going to use jump scares, make sure to only employ them as a punishment for failure. Don't cram your game full of them, otherwise they'll lose their effectiveness. Or you could just throw in the Alien Isolation Xenomorph. That thing could make any game terrifying.